Listening to Outspoken the last few days, and they've really been focusing on this ballot measure that the Senate was voting on. And this
Secure the Border Act?
Yeah, and as they were pointing out, as Bruce St. James and Gatos were pointing out, it's the Secure the Border Act that doesn't actually have any border security measures in it. One of the provisions in there had to do with detaining DACA recipients, which I thought was a bit extreme. That's been amended now, so that's no longer in the bill.
Well, the ballot measure would make crossing the border a state crime.
Okay, crossing the international border anywhere except a port of entry.
Right.
So what are we seeing as far as illegal immigration in the United States goes right now? Today, I feel like this is a bill targeted at crossers 1995. Because right now, it's people coming to ports of entry and claiming asylum. Mm-hmm. It's not people sneaking across the desert in the middle of the night. Not that it doesn't happen still.
It's a lot more few and far between, though. Good point.
Yeah.
And apparently, the House Concurrent Resolution 2060, I guess is what they're calling it now, because like you said, they're trying to make it a ballot initiative. I lost my train of thought a bit on it.
Well, what they've been telling us is that you're supposed to witness somebody crossing the border illegally.
And wasn't there a provision put in there, too, that basically said, hey, depending on what happens with Texas.
Yes.
Since there's, is it all the way up to the Supreme Court now?
I believe it's headed to the Supreme Court. If it hasn't gotten there, it will be.
That looks at the constitutionality of, hey, can they enforce what they want to do? And we're not going to do anything here in Arizona until we find out if what Texas wants to do is constitutional, at least as far as that provision goes.
Well, and the big issue with the Texas bill, like the Arizona bill, is that enforcement of immigration is a national matter, federal matter,
yeah.
Right? It's not a state's matter. So it's one of those deals where crossing the border into the United States illegally is a federal crime, but it is not a state crime.
Correct.
Right. And what Arizona is saying is we want to make it a state crime. And so now you run into this weird gray area. I can't think of another example, and maybe you can, where there's a federal crime that isn't also potentially a state crime.
I would
or is not allowed to be a state crime. Yeah. So I was thinking, for instance, like marijuana, still a federal thing, right? But states have legalized it. So you may have states that have decided not to follow that federal law, and the feds haven't really cracked down on that, whether it's been Republican or Democratic administrations. But I can't think of a situation, and again, maybe there is, and maybe it's something that's far more, detailed, where it would be a federal crime but is not allowed to be a state crime. That's peculiar to me.
Yeah, well, what was peculiar about this concurrent resolution to me was there was an amendment passed that would require officers to personally witness an illegal border crossing, obtain a video of the violation, and then here's the really sticky part. You tell me how you interpret this. Or utilize some other constitutionally valid probable cause to make an arrest.
So what they're trying to do is get away from the show us your papers argument that we had with SB 1070.
So, but what falls under utilize some other constitutionally valid probable cause to make an arrest? The Democrats don't like that because they say that's way too vague, and there could be some sort of catch-all that could be abused by the cops, which I also think it feels like we're just trying to fight about verbiage and language.
Yeah, but this is the time to fight about the verbiage and language.
It is,
rather than saying
that
somebody
does seem vague. Like, what are you getting at?
Yeah, I don't know. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to say this is not a if you're brown you're under arrest bill, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't want to say that we're targeting Hispanics, because that's inevitably what the thought is that if you've crossed the southern border illegally, chances are you are Hispanic, or at least that would be. You'd be more likely to be suspected of that. Now, we know that people have crossed the southern border from other countries who may have other ethnicities, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, you're talking about South Americans and Central Americans and Mexicans coming across the southern border.
But so we've put some amendment into a bill that would say, hey, you're a Phoenix police officer and you just happen to be down at the border.
Well, you wouldn't be.
Right. But again, the amendment would require officers to personally witness an illegal border crossing.
See,
when would that ever happen?
Only for the border communities. right? Only for the counties on the southern border.
One would think.
So where I see that there's a benefit to the bill is, suppose that you are a Yuma cop and you see somebody come across the border.
Okay.
Right? And you, right now, you can't do anything except call CBP and say, I just saw somebody jump over the fence and come into the United States, and you can't do anything. It makes sense to me to be able to say, if you're a Yuma officer and you happen to be near the fence and you see somebody who jumps into the United States, that you would be able to detain that person and then make contact with CBP.
But you did also start off this segment pointing out the fact, too, that most people who are crossing these days are crossing at the points of entry. They're not hopping the fence or coming under the fence or
Absolutely.
through the fence or just crossing in the desert.
Which in most cases...
They're seeking asylum.
Absolutely. This would not apply to... I think it's up to something like 80%
asylum
or something.
Seekers.
Right? Yeah, asylum seekers. People that are coming into the United States and then claiming asylum.
At the ports of entry, correct.
Right. It wouldn't apply to any of them. But I do think that if you're in Nogales and you see somebody come across, right?
In the middle of the night or whatever.
Then I think a cop should be able to say, okay, I'm witnessing an illegal act. Even if it's not a state illegal act, it's a federal illegal act, I should be able to detain that individual. That makes sense to me. I feel like what Arizona is doing, however, is trying to say, we're going to enforce immigration on our own. And so I get a little bit worried when all of a sudden it's like, whoa, one, who's paying for this? Taxpayers, but we already pay for immigration enforcement on a federal level. Now, you might say, well, it's not being done. Okay, great, but it's going to cost you more now. Maybe you're okay with that.
I think a lot of people are.
One of the problems that I have with this is that the bill says that they want to enhance the E-Verify program. But nobody's really interested in enforcing the E-Verify. So if someone is able to conjure up a Social Security number, right? Or they get through the E-Verify program. How many employers out there are hiring people who are here in this country without legitimate documents knowingly? I would say that there are tens of thousands of companies that hire people here all the time that they know, or at least have a reasonable suspicion, are not in the United States legally.
I think our E-Verify system's pretty good, and generally they're jumping through hoops to bring those people on board.
Would it surprise you to find out that a meat packing company in Texas or Oklahoma or Kansas actually has somebody manufacturing false identifications in order to hire people?
It would not.
No. It wouldn't surprise me either.
And that would be highly illegal.
Highly illegal.
Thanks for watching The Chris and Joe Show. Click to see more from Chris and Joe and tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.